Hi again, here I am with your walk cycle, front and side view. It's the blocking, yeah, it's the blocking. I'm really liking it. I saw that you took off the arms, which is a great idea to polish to get the torso and legs really working well. So great. Um, so yeah, let's dive into it. Okay, first pose, great. Okay, the first thing I notice is you have to, so each pose is uh has the same amount of frames in between. So first pose, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3. Okay, 3 frames each. But okay, you have to take into account when we walk, the hips are moving at the same pace all the time. If we are doing a normal walk, the hips are with a completely even spacing. It's boom, boom, boom. The only thing that changes is the ups and downs. Depending on the walk, they can be one way or another. But the lateral movement, the movement forward, the hips are gonna be moving all the time at the same pace. So, knowing that, see how much the hips move from pose 1 to the down pose. Very little, right? And then boom, see how much they move from the down pose to the intermediate pose, then for the intermediate pose to the extreme up pose, and then to the contact pose. So as you can see, you have a few things going on, but a few variations, but the most important is this one. So here on the down pose, you need to make sure to move the hips much more forward, because otherwise when you go to splines, it's gonna be the character is gonna slow down, boom, then it's gonna accelerate a lot, then slow down, accelerate, slow down, accelerate all the time, because you have it here, you have 3 frames moves very little, and then boom, these frames is gonna speed up a lot, then slow down a little more, slow down, and then speed up. So it's gonna be a bit funky, the work cycle. So before continuing, just make sure that the hips move forward at the even spacing. So probably you will want to check the graph editor and make sure that the graph editor line is a straight line. Of course, it's a bit of a pain getting the poses right, because of course, if you move the hips, then you're gonna be like, oh, um, then yeah, like the knee, whatever, is gonna be a bit of a pain. Maybe you have to move this pose a bit back, just a tiny bit, so there's not much movement. You know, you're gonna have to adjust a few things. About the knees, maybe if you move it, it starts to bend, whatever. But first you need to make sure that the hips move properly, and then adjust the rest, because otherwise it's gonna be really hard to polish in the future. Okay, that being the most important part. Then another thing. Okay, here you can see how the hips are even. See, no rotation forward, so no rotation forward, no rotation back. Great. But this, you can see here how the leg starts to move forward and the hips are leading the movement. So actually we should start to see the hips rotating over this leg already, because the leg is already moving forward. So we should already see the hips favoring this leg. Even in this moment, the hips should start a tiny bit favoring this leg, because it's starting to move forward. But here, most definitely, the hips should already be favoring this leg. Because here you can see how, boom, all of the sudden, from this pose to this one, see how the hips move? But if you check it, actually, the upper part of the leg was much more forward in relation to the hips than in this moment. So if we're talking about hip rotation, it would even make more sense that the hips are more rotated in this part, in this moment, in this pose, and a bit less in this one. Because if you take into account the upper part of the leg, it's much more forward in relation to the hips than in this one. In this one, it's much more straight. So of course, yeah, the body is a bit more forward and everything, but in relation to the back leg, so you have to take that into account as well. But for like, even if you don't take account the last thing, already the hips, the thing I want you to take into account is that this rotation of the hips forward over this leg should already be happening in this moment here. Um, okay, what else? Oh, see, you have it quite a lot in here in this one. So I don't know if it's maybe the perspective view that doesn't show it, but in the other leg I can see that you actually have rotated the hips in this pose. I already have rotated the hips, so well, I don't know. Um, the only thing that I'm gonna say that is true, that maybe you don't need to rotate that much the hips. See how the hips are rotated quite a lot. It's going to be a quite exaggerated rotation on the hips in this walk cycle, which can be fine. I mean, each walk cycle is different, so maybe you want to exaggerate the rotations. Just know that this is not going to be too too much of a general walk cycle. It's going to have a bit more character, a bit more personality to it, because you are exaggerating the rotations on forward and back of the hips in this case. Or the side to side rotations, you know what I mean, over the leg that is going forward and back. Then, what else? Oh, okay, mm, I think you maybe you see how the torso, you rotate the torso and you remove the rotations in this pose already. Maybe you don't have to completely remove the rotations. I would keep the rotations pretty much in this pose, in this one, the torso rotations more or less in this pose. So just easing out of the pose, going into this pose. So instead of maybe an intermediate pose between this rotation and this rotation, so it's not completely again sideways, but see how it goes almost completely sideways in this one. Yeah, maybe not that much, but again, it's something that you're gonna have to adjust and see further down the line. So I wouldn't worry too much about that at the moment, but just keep it in mind. Um, See, it's just out that you see how even though it's the down pose, the the proportions, the leg forward, the leg back, is all in the same place. So I think it's a bit too much rotating, like almost putting the torso sideways already when is when the rest of the legs and body, the hips and the legs are pretty much um in the same amount of rotation. Oh, just let me check one more thing. Okay, just be careful here. I don't know if it's just my perspective, but I know that of course you are taking the weight onto this leg, so it's normal that the hips rotates um rotates in this way, like over the to like to compensate for the weight, but maybe it's a bit too much. um I don't know, could it be? I'm not sure. just make sure that you are not putting them completely sideways. Okay. Okay. I mean, it looks really good when I watched it. It's just a few things that that it's better that you adjust now, so you don't have to fight with them in the spline phase. And then this one, okay, in this one at first glance, it's looking quite good. The only thing is, at first glance, I feel that the upper body is a bit, it's not as smooth as I would like to, and probably it has to do with the hips when you look at it. So of course I already checked that, and if you check, okay, so she's putting the weight onto this leg, great. So she's shifting the weight onto the supporting leg, great. Oh, but you see here what happens. So basically, she still has the weight over the supporting leg, but here she hasn't even reached the contact pose. She's already quite far away from the contact pose, and she's already shifting a lot the weight over, like, she's already shifting a lot the weight over this leg, and it's quite soon, too soon. So you see how the weight is on this leg. The weight in this pose, if you have the hips here, in this pose, the hips should be pretty much in the same place. You can start to ease in, to ease out, to ease out to the left, or you could even finish the ease in to the right. So in this pose, you could have it even more to the right, or a bit more to the left. It's just an adjustment on where do you want to start the weight shift. But in this pose, the hips should still be pretty much exactly in the same place. So again, you can exaggerate the weight over this leg still for a bit more, so you have a bit more of a shift, or you can start to move the weight as you have it here over the left, but would be much more or less. It would be just practically just millimeters, just a tiny bit, but not that much. This is too much. She's shifting already too much the weight over that leg. And this, as she is in this pose, as she is starting to, she has prepared so when she knows that she can support her weight, because she's already prepared the foot to shift the weight onto this leg, then she is confident, her body is confident to say, okay, now I can shift the weight onto this leg, because I can shift my body weight onto this leg, because I know that I have a supporting foot that is waiting to get that weight. So in this pose, in the contact pose, is when you would start, you would have a big spacing, moving the leg, the weight over this leg. But it wouldn't even be that much, to be honest, because when you really want to show the character shifting the weight, is as she's, see how from the contact pose to the when she's putting all the weight onto this leg, we practically don't see any movement at all. See, it's here and here. So okay, we can see a little bit, but literally she goes from not any weight supported on this leg, and all the weight supported onto this leg, and she hasn't pretty much moved at all to this to the left. Why? Because in this pose she's already too much on, the body is already too much to the left. So what I would do is keep the body in this place. You can start to move it a little bit in this pose, just a tiny bit. Then in the contact pose, you start to move it a bit more to the left, but not too much, just a decent amount. And as she puts the weight onto the new leg, is when you start to make the bigger movement to the left. So as she's putting the weight onto that leg, then you show how the body moves to the so it's like hold, move, hold, contact pose, move, hold, contact pose, move, hold, contact pose, move. So it's as soon as she has the contact pose, then boom, shifts the weight onto the next leg. It doesn't have to be too exaggerated, because of course you don't want the character to hold and then boom, move hyper fast as soon as the contact pose, um, as soon as she reaches the contact pose, but you want to exaggerate it a little bit, you know what I mean? So it starts to move, contact pose, and then speeds up, then holds a little bit, starts to move, contact pose, and then speeds up, kind of like that. Okay, same here. See, you don't move that much the body that soon, because in this moment you still want to have the weight onto that leg, onto the leg on the left. And another thing that I saw that you did is that although I think it's weird, because I see so many people teaching it this way, and I don't know really why. Like I when I was studying, um there was the theory, well, the taught us that the hips could move in two different directions, so it could move um down or up, so it could move as soon as up over the supporting leg, or down. So it's a bit, they say a bit, so they basically say that in the contact pose is when you have the extreme of of the hip up over the contacting pose, and they were like, yeah, you can do that this way. When I've worked in animation, no one does it this way. In fact, when you do it this way, it doesn't feel quite natural, to be honest. It loses weight. Of course, maybe for some characters, maybe it works, but what I found is it, like for me, it never works. And actually, what you want to do is actually have the hips in the opposite direction in the contact pose, because there is no weight yet on that pose. So when you have the hips, so these hips, as you have it here, pretty much hold this angle of the hips, and as soon as the weight is put onto this leg, then you can show see how you have more rotation in the hips as soon as she puts the weight onto this leg. Well, you want to have it even more exaggerated, because if you keep the hips this way, then as she puts the weight onto this foot, then boom, the hips shift a lot as soon as she puts the weight onto this foot. So you can show a lot more weight, because it's contact pose, then puts the weight onto the leg, and boom, the hips rotate. So you show all the weight being put onto that leg, and it feels much better, in my opinion. Um, so same here. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't raise the hips that much. I would keep them in the same angle as you have it here. The foot starts to move forward, keep them angle more or less. And of course, in the front view, it's gonna be a bit tricky to analyze this, because when the foot is moving forward, it seems that the hips. So if the hips are like that, and the foot is forward, in the frontal view, it's gonna seem like the hips are like that, just because this hips is in front, and it gives a false perception that it's a bit more raised. But anyways, what I wanted to you to keep in mind is, for me, I think it's better to keep the hips down over the leg until the weight is put onto that leg. Then you can boom, shift. Um, then as soon as the weight is put onto the leg, boom, you shift the hips up. So you show all the weight, how it affects the hips. Okay. Um, Great. The feet look great. The knees look great, and the upper torso looks a bit funky. But I think it has to do because the hip movement side to side is not too well coordinated, as I mentioned. It's shifting too early, so then it creates this kind of sensation like boom. See uh, how the head just moves um, too soon. It feels a bit yeah. It feels a bit poppy the head just because the hips moved too early. If the hips were still here, then the head would still be here, and then you have a nice shift in the torso moving to the other side. So yeah, I would just mainly fix the hips, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, I know that uh, I've talked a lot. I hope I you get what I was trying to say. But yeah, man, this is looking really good. Um, so can't wait to see the next phase. Or if you want to post again the blocking phase with these changes or whatever, I will give you another round of feedback. So great work, and till the next time.